Welcome into a new daily venture from Husker247 that we are actually calling Husker247 Daily because we lack creativity, but we also wanted you to know who it is and when it is. And it really doesn't get more simple than that. I am Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz, and we are going to chat with you at 10 a.m. Monday through Friday for 10 minutes, going over the biggest things that are happening in Husker athletics. It's going to be a lot of football. But occasionally there's going to be some volleyball talk. There's going to be some basketball, some baseball, and of course recruiting because you know this, Bruntz. Nebraska athletics is essentially 24/7. We are aptly named to cover this program, which almost never sleeps. And you also never sleep. So it's a nice marriage of those two things.
Yes, it'll be good to speak daily on topics of the day. 10 minutes. We won't bore you too much, so I like it.
Yeah. So let's just dive right into it. And I just kind of want your thoughts, Bruntz. Nebraska named their captains for the upcoming season. Was there any kind of surprises, anything that jumped out of you out of the group of six? I believe it was six that were named by Nebraska this week.
No, it felt like it was kind of like the next crew of guys that were, the guys who weren't single-digit guys who were named captains. It was probably like they were next on the list, I guess, and really close. But when you kind of dial into who's actually there, I mean, a lot of guys make sense. I mean, the only Singleton makes sense, Dylan Raiola makes sense, Henry Lutovsky, another leader. Dane Key, to his credit, has done a nice job, I think, since coming to Nebraska of getting into leadership and being a guy that's kind of looked to in that room. And Marcus Buford, for years has kind of taken on that captain's role. So, the only not surprised, but a guy that I think maybe doesn't get the credit that from the outside that he maybe gets on the inside is Ceyair Wright. He's a single digit guy. He's a captain now. By all accounts, since coming from USC last summer, he's really just kind of taken things and run with it. So I think you have to give him a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, I was in a conversation last week on one of the shows that I am on, and it was about Ceyair Wright and sort of how he's become a bit of an ambassador for Nebraska football. I know you ducked out a little bit early with the open scrimmage, but he got on the mic at the end of it and thanked people for being there. And certainly with his acting background and all of that, he certainly can have some MC chops on it as well. But from behind the scenes, it sounds like he has done a really nice job working with younger defensive backs, not just about on the field stuff, but just off the field, being a resource for them, with stuff going through classrooms or just adapting to a college football locker room or how you should try to handle your business, in the locker room when there are disputes. And so I think he's taken on this sort of big brother role. And I think that's also why he's kind of a natural fit for there. And I think these six names also sort of tell you where the veterans are on this roster. It shouldn't be a surprise that there isn't a defensive lineman that's a team captain. You could maybe make an argument with Javin Wright having been here forever. They've plenty of depth at that next level at linebacker, but I think with Singleton, Buford, and Ceyair Wright, you've got a lot of defensive guys that have played a lot of football that are expected to have key roles for Nebraska, and so they kind of all made sense. It was one of these where Nebraska's captain situation, you sort of just knew the three guys that went to Vegas were going to be on that list, and the rest was just sort of filling in from there. I guess with Dane Key, it's a bit of a surprise because I wouldn't say he's had a quiet fall camp, but he's had a limited fall camp. And so I wasn't quite sure, what his role was with all of this. And that's a wide receiver room where they kind of need a leader like Dane Key to sort of step up and pull them through because it's a talented group and there's a lot of expectations, I think, that are going to be placed on them because there is so much talent in that room.
I think you could make a case for both Key and Wright that they, having been other places, I think there's some value in that too. I think specifically with Ceyair, he feels like a guy that probably benefited from a change of scenery. Like I think getting out of LA and having to do something a little bit different getting away from home a little bit was probably he's kind of flourished with that. And I think Dane Key has so far, at least off the field, been exactly what you would want in a veteran transfer portal addition. You want somebody that comes in, kind of, frankly, has a bit of a quiet off season, but also is a leader for a younger group. So, I think his relationship with Dylan too is going to be really important for this offense because from the sound of things, they're both on the same page. They're roommates now. Get that alert out there before the season starts. But I think that's a credit to both he and Ceyair that they've been able to come in and have the type of impact in a relatively short amount of time. Relatively speaking.
Well, let's dive into the thing that came out on Friday, and that is Nebraska's depth chart. We talked about it on our last Husker 24/7 podcast episode, just sort of what our expectations were, where some of those position battles were, and that sort of thing. There wasn't a lot of what I would call big surprises, Bruntz, but the one that I think would register as discussion worthy, and I don't know that it snuck under the radar, but Nebraska didn't spend a lot of time hyping him up. Williams Nwaneri earning that or. They didn't keep it to the 3 that we would have preferred, but Williams Nwaneri getting on the top line of the depth chart, I think is a fascinating development for Nebraska's defensive line, and a former 5-star player who came from Missouri with, I think it's fair to say there were some real questions about what Nebraska was getting there with an elite talent that did not have a strong 2024.
Yeah, the or with Cameron Lenhart. I'm fascinated to see what that actually means in practice because I can see scenarios where those two are out there together at the same time. Certainly on third downs, I think you're going to see a pretty good mixing and matching of personnel. I kind of thought along the same lines, the breakdown of the Jack linebackers was interesting for the same reasons where obviously there's an order on paper, but in practice, what's that actually going to look like?
Could you see 3 guys out there on the field all at once? I think you really could.
I think you can. I think you will. But I think at least Nwaneri being in that conversation, I think that's a good sign. And, I think you kind of know what you have in Cam Lenhart. You got somebody that's going to be steady, that has, I think, a higher ceiling to unlock as a pass rusher. But, the fact that you've got the oars there was at least noteworthy to me. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see who's the first guy out there with the oar. I could see it being Lenhart, but, at least that's progress for Nwaneri, who's a guy, very high ceiling guy that they're going to count on a lot. Let me throw this back at you since we're asking questions here. TJ Lateef winning the backup quarterback job, is that a big deal to you?
It's not a surprise to me, but I think my thoughts on the Jalen Gramstad situation are pretty well known for 2 years. So I just think you go with the guy who has more talent in that situation. I understand he doesn't have the experience, but neither does Gramstad at this level. So what is he sacrificing? And I see a guy in TJ Lateef who might be the quietest quarterback commitment recruit, quietest true freshman quarterback that's an Elite 11 player that Nebraska's maybe ever had because of the shadow of Dylan Raiola. And he's had a great spring. He had a great fall. I mean, you've heard the same things I have from behind the scenes. He did a really nice job running the offense when they were giving him opportunities. And he's a guy that has an interesting skill set. So if and when we get to see TJ Lateef out there, I'm going to be pretty excited to see what that all looks like with Dana Holgorsen.
One more guy that I think flew under the radar for a lot of people, Rex Guthrie, your number 2 rover behind Deshaun Singleton. He's a guy they love behind the scenes. They've liked him for a long time. They basically offered him as a camp guy after he shows up and runs a 4.4. Not a lot of offers before Nebraska, and has kind of quietly come back from a really, really bad leg injury and put himself in a position to contribute as a redshirt freshman. I think he was another name to at least kind of maybe highlight a little bit that maybe wasn't on the radar of a lot of people until that depth chart came out.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the sort of unique names that came out of the secondary. The rest we sort of knew, I think, were coming. But Rex Guthrie stepping into that spot tells you a lot about the work that he's done to put himself in that situation. And similar to a TJ Lateef, I will be very interested to see what it looks like when he's on the field, and we should see it Thursday at Arrowhead. All right, everybody, this has been Husker 24/7 Daily. 10 minutes of Nebraska talk at 10 a.m. Check us out on the YouTube page. Be sure to visit us at Husker247.com. Plenty of coverage, plenty of content, everything you know and love from Husker 24/7. We'll be back tomorrow. It'll be Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7 Daily. Make it part of your routine.